For every single person going back from cloud to on-prem, there are more people going from on-prem to cloud.
This is DevOps Paradox, episode number 191, looking back on our 2022 predictions. Welcome to DevOps Paradox. This is a podcast about random stuff in which we, Darren and Victor, pretend we know what we're talking about. Most of the time, we mask our ignorance by putting the word DevOps everywhere we can and mix it with random buzzwords like Kubernetes, serverless, CI/CD, team productivity, islands of happiness, and other fancy expressions that make us sound like we know what we're doing. Occasionally, we invite guests who do know something, but we do not do that often since they might make us look incompetent. The truth is out there, and there is no way we are going to find it. P.S. It's Darren reading this text and feeling embarrassed that Victor made me do it. Here are your hosts, Darren Pope and Victor Farsick. At the beginning of the year of 2022, we had episode 140, where we were trying to predict what 2022 was going to hold for us. The lead of that episode was, everybody needs to understand at least one big cloud vendor, AWS, Azure, Google, Alibaba. You need to understand that and how to consume the services within that. Did that prove out to be true this year?
That you have to understand one big vendor, yes. I mean, definitely. I think that even those working in organizations that are fully on-prem should do it. It's unavoidable. It's happening. Everybody's going cloud, or everybody's cloud. Whether it's for 5% of their workloads or 95%, if you want your career to be healthy, you need to understand it. Have practical experience with it.
Well, you said two different things there. You said first a company, but then you said you.
Yes, because even if you're in a situation that there is no opportunity, during working hours to work on one of the big three or big four, you should find time. I don't know, maybe nights, weekends, something. I would really be scared for myself if I would be applying for a job now or especially in the future, and one of the big clouds is not on my CV. I know I wouldn't employ you, to be frank, kind of whomever you are, fictitious you.
And if you were one of the people throughout one of the recent layoffs at end of year with the list, Amazon, Twitter, who am I forgetting? Meta. Yeah, I'm forgetting a lot more. But these were in the thousands. Not just a couple hundred here and there, but thousands. Now, for Amazon, it was a small percentage, like single-digit percentage, right? Most of these were single-digit percentages. Twitter, who knows what's going to happen there. And to be honest, even though this is coming out on December 28th, we are recording this actually before December even starts. So a lot of things can happen within the next 4 to 5 weeks.
Hey, by the time we release this episode, we might not be able to tweet about it.
That's true. It's very possible. But if you were one of the ones caught up in the layoffs and you didn't have at least a cloud skill, and now you're trying to get hired by startups right now, or now that there's a lot of talent. Now, whether or not it's great talent or bad talent, there's just a lot of talent out there. If you're trying to get hired on somewhere, like you just said, if you don't have any cloud experience, there is a near zero chance I would hire you. Near zero. So I think that one holds up. You've got to know at least a cloud provider. Let's take it one step further. Is there any reason why you needed to have learned multiple providers this year?
It's cool, but not really a hard requirement. There are certain jobs in certain places that require very high specialization in AWS or Azure or Google Cloud, right? And then there is no way around it. I want a person who has 3 years experience in AWS, period, right? But for many others, it's not that much, hey, I'm using Azure and you have experience in AWS. It's more like, yeah, do you understand how this works, right? I could easily hire somebody, if I need somebody who uses Google Cloud and that somebody is using Azure, to me that's fine because you understand how those things work. You prove that you're willing to learn, kind of like you're in a place that uses something that is closer to 2022, right? So that's okay. One is okay. And then for majority of people, if you want to go deep, then you don't have a choice really than one. Kind of how many people know in depth more than one? Not really many.
So from our complete data set, we're 1 for 1. You need to at least understand that, or at least understand a single cloud provider. So good. Yay. Yay us. 1 for 1. The other thing that you predicted, I didn't predict it, is that we would be traveling again.
I predicted it. I traveled. I traveled only so that I don't fail in this episode in my predictions.
So compared to 2021, how many trips did you do this year? Ballpark, do you think?
A lot. I mean, a lot. Really wild guessing here, but 10, let's say. I mean, a lot considering that all of them happened, almost all of them happened after summer, right?
Right. Yeah, as I was fixing to say, I was thinking since September you've done at least 10.
Yeah, exactly. Something like that.
But thinking back on at the beginning of the year, there wasn't that much. You were around quite a bit.
Maybe 1 or 2. That's
yeah.
It.
Really, the first big one for you was KubeCon EU, if I remember right.
Among big ones, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you had a couple of small ones, and you had a couple even locals in your town, which was, that was sort of the testing point, I think. But then it went crazy from there.
I don't know whether those count. Does it count? If I take a metro for a trip, does that count?
It Probably does. You left the house. You left the house. So traveling. So again, I think we're 2 for 2. I even traveled. I think I left the house twice this year. That's pretty good.
Almost 3 times, right?
No, I did leave 3. No, twice is twice. I did leave for that one you're mentioning.
Okay, but you came back.
Yeah. But I came back because of hurricanes. Kubernetes is a must. I think that's still holding.
No doubt about that.
This one, I don't think we got right.
Mm-hmm.
Serverless is coming. I think we're still too early on serverless. I didn't see it really break out this year like I think we expected it to break out.
That depends how you look at it. Break out as if it is the dominant way of running workloads. We're definitely not there. I'm not sure whether we will be. I see a lot of increased usage in a lot of new services like Fly.io and quite a few others. Google Cloud Run. Okay, Google Cloud Run is not far from where it was. So yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe it's not. It did not. Maybe it didn't really increase the usage as I hoped. You're right. It's there. It's not falling, I think, but it's flatter than it should be.
You bring up Fly, and I put Fly into the Heroku bucket to where it's. I don't consider that serverless. I think that is more, here's my app, go run it.
I try to put functions as a service in a bucket of being a subset of serverless.
I agree with that. So, I guess technically the Herokus are serverless.
I think that Heroku is serverless. I mean, I define serverless as if, here's my code, run it. Please don't kind of bother me with infrastructure and where it's running and all the stuff, right? Maybe I have a slightly wider definition of serverless.
Yeah, I guess that's right. But so in that case, we could have said serverless has always been here, but I think it's going to become more interesting as people start, and this might be looking a little bit towards 2023, how people are trying to manage their infrastructures. Notice I said infrastructures, not just infrastructure. I think people are starting to get more, I don't know, there's a hot take on this from something that David Heinemeier Hansen said, to where they're going to be bringing Basecamp back in. They're cloud repatriating, if you will, and trying to move out of cloud. And they did say it's going to take 3 or 4 years to do it. Now, that's a smaller company compared to quote unquote enterprises, which we'll get into in a minute. But I think people are starting to see that, okay, OpEx is better than CapEx, except when your OpEx is, 10 times your multiple of what your company is worth.
What is OpEx, CapEx? I have no idea.
So CapEx is capital expenditures.
Okay.
Versus operational expenditures. It's all accounting. Typically, you would take OpEx over CapEx because you just spend it and it's done.
Yeah.
Versus dealing with the CapEx issues of, what's the A word I'm looking for? Accruals. We want the math to be easy, even in finance. So that went down a really bunny trail from serverless of, well, we're talking about things. But one of the things that you did say in that episode 140, enterprises are companies where a significant percentage of software development enterprises are company. Okay. I'm trying to come back with how we define this because enterprises are always a funny thing. So enterprises are companies where a significant percentage of software development is not done in-house. We're talking about legacy problems and, outsourcing and all those other things. Things that are important, you try to do internally.
And I will correct myself and say, I still think that that's true, but that's legacy enterprises, not enterprises. I consider Netflix and Google and Microsoft to be enterprise companies.
Correct. And you even brought that out in 140. So that's fine. But did that change any this year? I'm starting to think through, even thinking about Twitter, where they had a lot of contractors. Meta had lots of contractors. So the question is in all these layoffs, number one, I don't have the details on it, but did those layoffs count the contractor numbers in there? I think for some of them they did. It doesn't really matter. But if I'm getting rid of people, the first people I'm going to get rid of in a company are probably contractors, right?
Almost certainly. Yes. I mean, I haven't been going through numbers to confirm this, but, accidentally through people I know and stuff like that, yes, contractors had a really hard time during COVID because it costs nothing to fire a contractor. Let's put it that way. And it costs one way or another money to hire a full-time employee. I do not necessarily think that the desire to have contractors instead of fully employed people by companies I don't think it diminished. It's just because of the current situation, COVID, and we are firing and what's not. Contractors were first to go, but they're coming back. I'm not that concerned about contractors as if contractors literally per people, but rather, those offshore companies that are not individual contractors, but hey, here's 1,000 people, right? But I don't think that that's going away, unfortunately. And nothing wrong with offshore or anything like that. I'm just saying that's nothing to do with quality of people working there and none of those things. It's simply, if you take something seriously, you need to have people in-house. That's as easy as that.
Which leads to the near final one, which is we can probably camp here for a few hours, which we won't. You said that remote work is here to stay. Did we get that one right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, now, the percentage of remote work was higher before than now. So some companies, some teams went back to in-office work now that COVID situation calmed down. I thought that would happen. But what I'm trying to say is that I'm pretty sure that if we would go now through statistics and stuff like that, and we exclude COVID, but we say before and after COVID, now after COVID, there is a higher percentage of remote work. I would have a really hard time being convinced otherwise.
I think what we've learned in these past near almost 3 years can be shown in our schools. Now, normally I'm not a big proponent of public school. Full transparency, my wife and I homeschooled our daughter. We're not anti-public school. I came through public school. My wife came through public school. But the thing that has turned out to be really interesting, in fact, I was watching this on the news the other day. We were having snow up in the mountains. So I live near the beach and live near the mountains. It's sort of weird. 3 hours each way. But we were having snow up in the mountains a couple of days ago. And I was like, today we're going to be doing remote learning. Prior to 2020, that just meant an off day. But now things don't have to stop because of X, whatever X is. And I think that's good, not just for remote work, but for remote everything. Is it as effective? Depends. I could argue that remote education or remote learning is not as good as in person. I could argue that point. But for somebody that's been working primarily remote for over 20 years, I know my rhythms. For a lot of people, they didn't have that coming into 2020. But I think over 3 years, for people that were able to work remote, now for the people that haven't been able to work remote, like medical, retail, food services, they just sort of kept on going with more restrictions, if you will, whatever that restriction may be. But for us that work in knowledge, if you will, you either got it together or you found a different gig.
To me, that's very similar, like discussions about cloud and on-prem, right? I do not think that the cloud will ever be 100%, but, and there will always be on-prem, self-managed, all that stuff, no doubt. But for every single person going back from cloud to on-prem, there are more people going from on-prem to cloud. And I think it's the same thing with remote work. Yes, some people went remote, now are back in the office, but that percentage is not the same, equally high as all the people who went remote. It must be increasing. We will never get 100%. There are jobs, there are types of roles, there are types of companies that will continue being in office. There are people who like office. Heck, I like office every once in a while, but no, remote is here to stay.
I don't know that I could go to an office every day anymore.
No. I'm quitting that same day when I hear that. Now, if a company would be willing to rent an office for me, and that office happens to be the office where I'm right now, and is willing to pay for that, then that would be okay.
Like walking distance, 5-10
No, I mean
drive
like kind
distance.
of pay me for the room.
Oh, for your place right now. Oh, okay. Okay, fair enough. Because, and especially in what we do, now, our day jobs afford us the chance to work in front of screens, and typically we're not in front of clients like we were in previous jobs, right? We both worked in professional services. Now we work more in the developer advocate type roles for our day jobs. So our worst tools are Keynote or PowerPoint. Those things are miserable, by the way. Both. It's all Markdown nowadays, kids, in case you didn't know. But remote staying here. I don't see a day, and even before everything started in 2020, sales teams were always remote. Heck, I had an uncle that started in sales in the 50s. He would show up each year for the Christmas party at the company, which was 5 or 6 hours away, and then he would never see it again for another year.
There is also a huge difference between, huge, massive companies like IBM or Microsoft that say, hey, we are so big that we have an office in every major town in the world, right? But now lower that size slightly, right? Let's say that we're talking about companies with less than 1,000 employees, or I could even argue bigger companies, right? You cannot not do remote and expect good results today because you cannot be limited to a single city for your workforce pool, for potential future employees. It's just not going to work. And then there is sales that you mentioned. Are you going to open an office in every single major city so that you can hire a salesperson? No.
One more thing that we talked about, and we didn't make it as a prediction, but let's see if it's stuck for you or not. Every meeting should be recorded and transcribed. I believe that's still true, but did we see that actually grow any this year?
What did I mean about, if I said it about transparent?
Transcribed. Did I say transparent?
Transcribed.
Transcribed.
Okay,
transcribed.
yes. Yeah, so I'm not sure whether transcribed, but I rarely meet people anymore. And I'm in a specific situation. I literally get daily requests from random companies, random people, teams. I do not even know them, right? And I speak with them. And most of the time, the meeting starts by somebody on the other side saying, can this be recorded? I think it's becoming a muscle memory to record the meeting because it doesn't cost anything, right? I mean, it does cost some license for Zoom or something like that. I don't know whether free options allow you to record or not. Doesn't matter, but it costs nothing. So why not, right? And you never know when you're going to need to go back to it or show it to somebody. So I think that one holds. Not 100%, right? Nothing is ever 100.
And that's just part of remote work. It's just an extension of remote work. Is not everybody can be, okay, we can say that the global economy is maybe contracting a little bit to regional economies, right? Because even if you can't have somebody in every city, you might have people just in the US or might have people just in Europe, right? So it's more regional, even though, we both work for international companies. But there's no reason that a meeting shouldn't be recorded. Now, if it's just between two people, okay, that's questionable. But sometimes it's just between two people, much like this podcast. If we weren't recording this, nobody else would hear it. Right? This is sort of the case in point.
Even for two people, I see recorded more and more often. Before, I think that people were thinking, should we record this or no? I feel that now it's not even part of the thinking process. Should we do it or not? It's becoming muscle memory. From personal experience, a lot of people that have recording enabled by default now in Zoom and what's not.
So when the meeting starts, it just automatically starts recording?
Yeah.
No. Interesting.
Why not, kind of?
Yeah, there's no reason not to, I think. Now, obviously, there are probably reasons too. Like if you're talking specific things that shouldn't be recorded, like company secrets and those kinds of things, like you use some common sense, but be ready to quickly hit that record button instead of being late to hit the record button. Because if you're late to hit the record button, you probably should go back and re-say everything you already said. And finally, this sort of still goes in there. A statement that you made around this was you need to build your skills to be able to work remotely. I still think is very true, but I want to take it one step further. If you are going to be much like me, and I guess to a case Victor, and be hard-headed about working remotely, don't expect your company to provide everything you need to do your job.
Oh, yeah.
You need to invest in yourself, because what happens when you leave that company? If that company had provided, quote unquote, everything for you, and you move on to the next job that is also remote, the chances of you transitioning quickly, if you're having to replace all the gear, is near zero. Whereas if the only thing that's getting swapped out is maybe a laptop, but then you've got your camera, you've got your microphone, you've got your monitor set up, you've got your workspace set up. If the only thing you're basically doing is switching out the CPU, that part of getting started and being, how shall I say, useful to your new employer is a better thing. That's my opinion.
I like what you said, because while you were talking about it, I just realized that even without really strategizing about that, I'm really expensing on my company only the equipment that is for remote work, meaning when I'm not in my home office, right? like laptop and things like that, even though I could expense much more, right? But kind of like I feel like this is my corner. This is my office. I control what the equipment is, and I own the equipment in a way. In my case, it was a bit problematic because I changed quite a few companies in near past, and then now I should ship the desktop computer, right? I don't want to do that, and I like it. So, yeah.
Yep. So if the worst thing that changes out is a laptop, that's easy.
Exactly.
It's just no different than you buying a new machine like I did this year, finally. By the way, Mac Studios, they're amazing. Okay, so 2022, we were probably 75-25, I think. Maybe a little bit better than that. So in next week's episode, we're going to be talking about what you need to know for 2023. We hope this episode was helpful to you. If you want to discuss it or ask a question, please reach out to us. Our contact information and a link to the Slack workspace are at devopsparadox.com/contact. If you subscribe through Apple Podcast, be sure to leave us a review there. That helps other people discover this podcast. Go sign up right now at devopsparadox.com to receive an email whenever we drop the latest episode. Thank you for listening to DevOps Paradox.